The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold air, that sterile, bone-deep chill that seeps in no matter how tightly you wrap your coat. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped so tightly on my lap they felt like one fused knot of nerves. Across from me was the man I once swore my life to, smiling politely like this was just another business meeting. He didn't look like a monster, he never did, but monsters rarely wear their true faces in daylight. Your Honor, his attorney began, voice smooth like butter over a knife. Our client is gravely concerned for the welfare of his son. The mother has exhibited erratic behavior, emotional volatility, and has on multiple occasions put the child in psychologically damaging situations. Every word felt like a punch, and I couldn't move, not even to flinch. Funny, isn't it? The man who once kissed my forehead every morning now stood there trying to erase me from my own child's life. I wasn't always this still. I used to laugh, loud speak my mind, dance barefoot in the kitchen while eggs burned on the stove. I was the kind of woman who made friends in grocery store lines and believed everyone had good in them, especially him. His name is Derek, my ex-husband. And the first time he told me I was crazy, he was still wearing our wedding ring. It was subtle at first, comments disguised as concern. Babe, are you okay? You've been emotional lately. I think you're overwhelmed. You should rest more. Why do you always react so strongly to everything? I believed him. Because love, when twisted, makes you doubt your own reflection. After our son Oliver was born, I became quieter, not because of depression, but because I had to listen more. A newborn demands your senses, not your voice. But Derek took my silence as weakness. Or maybe he crafted that narrative long before I noticed. I found messages one day on a second phone he forgot to hide. Conversations with someone named Mel, full of "she's impossible and I'm trapped." I didn't confront him with rage. I confronted him with heartbreak. That was my mistake, because Derek didn't apologize. He retaliated. 2 weeks later, he moved out, filed for separation. And then, he made his move. He told the courts I was mentally unfit, claimed I screamed at Oliver, that I left the stove on for hours, that I'd locked myself in the bathroom and sobbed while the baby cried alone. None of it was true, but you know what hurts the most? No one asked me. Not really, not like they asked him. My voice became the background noise in a room where he performed like a saint, concerned father, responsible man, victim of an unstable woman. He brought in witnesses, friends who hadn't seen me in years, a therapist I'd stopped seeing after 2 sessions who never saw me with my son. They all said the same thing: she's fragile, she needs help. Maybe I was fragile, but I was never dangerous, never unloving, never unstable. I was just tired from trying to hold up a house built on quicksand. The first time I realized how deeply he'd twisted the truth was when the judge asked Ms. Hart, "Are you currently taking any medication?" I answered truthfully. "Yes, for mild postpartum anxiety, prescribed managed," the attorney pounced. "Isn't it true you've struggled with anxiety since your teenage years?" And just like that, I was no longer a mother. I was a file, a diagnosis, a liability. I looked over at Oliver, my sweet boy, barely 9, sitting beside a child services rep. His feet didn't even reach the floor. He wore his favorite blue sneakers and a gray hoodie I bought him on a rainy Sunday in September. He didn't look at me, he looked at Derek, and Derek winked at him. That moment cracked something in me. Not rage, not grief, something colder, a recognition. This wasn't about custody. This wasn't about our son. This was about winning. Derek needed to win. He needed to prove that I was broken so he wouldn't have to admit he was the one who broke me. And the court. They were listening. They nodded when he spoke, raised eyebrows when I defended myself. They didn't see a mother. They saw a narrative, and it wasn't mine. After the session ended that day, I sat alone in my car for an hour, the steering wheel cold under my fingertips, my breath fogging up the windshield. No one called to check on me. No one asked if I was okay. Except for one soft tap on the passenger window, Oliver. He climbed in without a word, handed me a napkin with something scribbled in pencil. "You're not crazy. I love you." That's when I knew. He saw everything. Even if he couldn't say it yet, but one day, he would. And when that day came, the court wouldn't be ready for the truth. They didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in their eyes. Every glance from the courtroom audience, every whispered murmur from behind the judge's bench, every stiff nod from the child psychologist who barely knew my name, all of it said the same thing. She's unstable. She's not safe. And that was the narrative Derek had engineered. With methodical precision, He built his case not on facts but on fears. The fear that a mother with a history of anxiety might snap. The fear that if they didn't act, a child might be at risk. And the most potent fear of all, that they might be wrong, and the price of being wrong could be a child's safety. Fear is louder than truth in a courtroom. And Derek knew that. He didn't just tell the judge I was crazy. He proved it not with truth, but with illusion. He curated a version of me that no one could trust. Exhibit A was a voicemail I left him during a panic attack. My voice trembled, shallow and hoarse, begging him to pick up. Please, I don't know what to do. I'm scared, Derek. I can't breathe. He paused the recording halfway through and looked at the judge. This is the environment my son is growing up in. No one asked what triggered the call. No one cared that it was the night my neighbor had collapsed outside our apartment and I'd been alone with Oliver, frozen between dialing 911 and keeping my son calm. Context dies when edited. And he was a master editor. Exhibit B, a statement from his sister, who hadn't visited our home in 2 years. She told me once that she hated being a mother. She said, her voice trembling with well-rehearsed emotion. She said it felt like drowning. They gasped. And I sat there mute, choking on the memory of that conversation, which I had actually whispered in a moment of postpartum exhaustion while breastfeeding at 3 a.m., desperate for sleep and clarity. But nuance doesn't fit in court transcripts. He had messages printed out, random snippets from texts to my best friend. I swear I'm losing my mind. I can't handle this alone. Some days I feel like disappearing. They weren't cries for help. They were survival songs. But the court didn't hear lyrics, only sirens. Even my therapist's report was twisted. She'd written patient exhibits signs of high-functioning anxiety and trauma-related overcompensation, often rooted in past emotional invalidation. Derek's lawyer cherry-picked it. Patient exhibits trauma-related overcompensation. Suddenly, I wasn't a mother doing her best. I was a ticking bomb in heels. My attorney tried. God, he tried. But, Your Honor, he argued, there's no evidence of neglect. No police reports, no CPS complaints, no missed doctor's appointments, no academic issues. Oliver is thriving. The judge leaned forward, expression unreadable, thriving or surviving. And just like that, everything I'd done right, every sleepless night, every scraped knee, I bandaged every book we read under a flashlight when the power went out, all of it was dismissed, erased. Rewritten by someone who wanted to win, not co-parent. I wasn't just fighting for custody, I was fighting for the right to exist as a mother, and I was losing. Oliver sat on the far side of the room, feet swinging above the floor, a coloring book in his lap. He hadn't touched in 20 minutes. His shoulders were hunched forward, like he was trying to fold himself invisible. And Derek. Derek looked like a hero. Perfect posture, smooth suit, soft-spoken. Even when he lied, his tone never wavered. My ex-wife, he said calmly, is not abusive, but she is chaotic, and children internalize chaos. Oliver told me himself, he's scared when she cries. He hides in the closet. I turned. Oliver looked away, but I knew that story. I remembered that day. He wasn't hiding from me. He was playing. He had a flashlight and stuffed animals. It was a secret cave, and I'd made him hot cocoa right after he called it Fort Brave. And now it was being used as evidence against me. I didn't cry. I didn't speak, because I realized something chilling. Nothing I said would matter. They didn't want my version. They already had his. But something shifted later that afternoon. We were walking out of the courtroom, I flanked by silence, Derek flanked by praise. The child service rep held Oliver's hand and he kept looking over his shoulder at me. That's when I saw it. His other hand curled tight around something in his hoodie pocket. Later that evening, I found a piece of paper in Oliver's backpack, slipped between a math test and a drawing of a dragon. It was a simple note scrawled in uneven pencil. Dad says not to tell. But I don't want to lie. I have something. Please don't be mad. I froze. What did he mean? What did he have? The next morning he was quiet, quieter than usual. He wouldn't eat his cereal, wouldn't look me in the eye. Just before he left for school, he hugged me longer than he had in weeks and whispered, "Don't give up." Okay, I couldn't breathe. My own son, barely tall enough to reach the sink, was trying to hold me up. He saw what no one else did. He felt the truth, even if he didn't yet know how to speak it in a way adults would understand. I called my lawyer. There's something Oliver isn't saying. I told him, something important. He paused. Do you think he's afraid? I think he's afraid of betraying the wrong parent. 2 days later, my lawyer received an unmarked envelope, no return address, no signature. Inside was a USB drive labeled in shaky all-caps handwriting, "For the judge." I held it in my hands like it was made of glass. Do you know what's on it? My lawyer asked. No, I whispered. But I know who it's from. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something rising in my chest that wasn't fear. It was fire. There's a kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. It doesn't soothe. It strangles. In the days before the final hearing, that silence lived in my home, nestled in the corners, curled beneath the furniture, coating the walls like invisible dust. And it lived inside my son, Oliver. My sweet, quiet boy, with eyes too observant for his age, had stopped speaking much at all. He still kissed me goodnight, still brushed his teeth without being asked, still curled up beside me during movie nights, but something about him was locked. He'd flinch when my phone buzzed. He'd close his sketchbook the moment I entered the room. He watched the front door like he was waiting for something or someone to come crashing in. The only words he said to me that Monday night were 5 soft syllables, barely audible as he climbed into bed. Is it okay to tell I didn't press him? I didn't ask, tell what, because I already knew. Somewhere inside him something was heavy and he was carrying it alone. That week blurred together, I went through the motions, brushed his hair, packed his lunch, sat through meetings with my lawyer, but it all felt like walking through water because something was coming, I could feel it. A storm. I couldn't see yet, but could smell in the air. At the final pretrial prep, my attorney, Mr. Laskin, slid a small manila envelope across the table. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me, eyes sharp beneath silver-rimmed glasses. It came anonymously, he said. No fingerprints, no metadata on the file, just this. Inside was a USB drive, same one I'd seen earlier, labeled in pencil for the judge. I stared at it. You haven't opened it, I asked. I did, he replied twice. And his silence was an answer. Then he leaned forward and said something that still lives in my bones. If what's on this drive is real, your ex-husband's case will implode in under 10 minutes. That night, I sat in Oliver's room long after he fell asleep. He lay there, limbs sprawled across the bed like a starfish, the way only kids can sleep, totally surrendered, trusting the world not to hurt them. I brushed a curl from his forehead, watched his chest rise and fall, and I whispered, "Thank you," because I knew he had found a way to speak, just not with words. The courtroom was full the next morning. It wasn't a criminal trial, it wasn't a scandal, but still people came, other parents, legal interns, court clerks, all of them drawn by the unspoken tension that surrounded our case. The father's calm charisma versus the mother's quiet desperation. Even the judge looked tense that morning, shuffling papers with more force than necessary. Derek walked in like he owned the room. He wore navy this time, no tie. Just enough casual polish to look humble and concerned. He nodded at me like we were still friends, like he hadn't spent the last 6 months trying to destroy me. Oliver sat beside the child services agent again, his face half hidden behind a fidget cube he kept turning over in his hands. He looked up at me once, just once, and I caught it, the nod. Barely there, but enough. Something was coming. We went through the motions. Derek's lawyer restated their position, that I was emotionally unstable, that Oliver expressed fear when with me, that I had a history of erratic behavior, documented through text messages, audio clips, and witness testimony. They called on his coworker again. They quoted my old journals again. They called me high risk and volatile. And when it was my turn, I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I just said, I've already told the truth. Whether it's heard or not is no longer up to me. Then my attorney stood. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't gesture wildly, he simply held up the USB drive. Your Honor, he said. We respectfully request the court's permission to submit one final piece of evidence delivered anonymously, but verified for authenticity. The content relates directly to the integrity of Mr. Hale's testimony and his influence over the child in question. The judge narrowed his eyes. What kind of content? Mr. Laskin turned to Oliver. Audio, he said, recorded by the child himself. A gasp. Derek jolted in his seat. The judge blinked. And you're certain this isn't doctored? We've had it analyzed. It's clean. The judge sighed and nodded. Proceed. They plugged it into the court's sound system. There was a moment of total stillness. Then click. Recording begins. You will tell them your mom yells. Got it. It was Derek's voice, sharp, hard, no longer calm, no longer smooth. You will say she locked you in your room and screamed for an hour. I don't care if it didn't happen. You want to live with me, don't you? Oliver's voice small, muffled. I don't want to lie. A slap, not a hit, but a slam on a table, loud, angry. You think she doesn't lie about me? She ruins my life. I ruin hers. That's fair. Another pause. Then the most devastating line. If you don't say what I told you, I'll make sure you go live with strangers. You hear me? Recording ends. You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. The judge stared at the speakers like they'd grown fangs. The child services worker turned pale. My lawyer folded his hands and said nothing, and Derek didn't speak because there was nothing left to say. Oliver had spoken through silence, through courage, and in that moment the courtroom didn't belong to lawyers or judges or polished liars. It belonged to a 9-year-old boy who'd had enough. The judge ordered an immediate recess. I walked out into the hallway shaking. My body didn't know whether to cry, scream, or collapse. Then I felt it, a small hand slipping into mine, Oliver. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. That evening, Mr. Laskin called. They've withdrawn the custody petition, he said. Full rights restored to you. Visitation to be renegotiated. Derek's being reviewed for coercion of a minor under perjury conditions. It's going to get worse for him before it gets better. I didn't celebrate. I just sat down beside my son on the floor. We built Lego cities in silence. And when I finally asked him, "Were you scared to record it?" He nodded. "But you did it anyway." He looked at me, those big brown eyes heavy with things no child should carry. "You said truth matters even when it's quiet." I smiled through the tears. Because he was right, and soon the whole world would hear. There are moments that split your life in two, moments that create a before and an after, moments where time doesn't stop. It implodes. And for me, it happened on a Tuesday. Inside a beige courtroom with flickering fluorescent lights and the scent of dry paper and tension thick enough to chew through, it was supposed to be just another hearing, another dance of legal semantics and rehearsed outrage, another attempt to paint me as an unstable woman clawing for control she didn't deserve. I had almost grown used to it. Almost. Derek came in wearing a tailored gray suit and a faint smirk. He adjusted his cufflinks like a man preparing for a TED Talk. Calm, polished, utterly convinced the performance was already won. Me, I wore black, not because I wanted to appear solemn, but because I was grieving the version of myself that once begged him to be kind. The judge entered, the bailiff called for silence, and the ritual began. My client Derek's lawyer began wishes to emphasize his ongoing concern for the well-being of his son. Despite recent emotionally charged developments, our position remains unchanged. The environment provided by Ms. Hartley remains unstable, unpredictable, and psychologically unsafe for Oliver Hale. Unstable, unpredictable, unsafe. Those were the words that had stalked me for months, words that had followed me like shadows whispered behind closed doors by strangers who never once asked me how I loved my son. They spoke of me in diagnostics, in cold clinical descriptors. They described me in past tense as if I were already gone. They looked at me and saw danger dressed in a mother's skin. But this time I didn't shrink, I didn't flinch, because I knew something they didn't, and he, my son, was about to show them. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. "Ms. Hartley's counsel, you have the floor." My attorney stood, unfolded a single sheet of paper, cleared his throat, then said, "Your Honor, we would like to call Oliver Hale to the stand." The room shifted. Derek's lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Your Honor, the child is 9 years old. He has no sworn testimony on record. He will not testify verbally," my attorney said carefully. "He would simply like to share something of his own will." A pause, a breath. Then the judge nodded. "Proceed." Oliver rose from his seat. He looked small, so small next to the towering bench and high-backed chair. He wore his school hoodie and the sneakers with the blue lightning bolt. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled something from his pocket. A small, well-worn digital voice recorder. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He walked forward, turned to the judge and said one sentence, just one. This is what I couldn't say out loud. Then he hit play. Click, and the world stopped breathing. Derek's voice filled the courtroom. Not the charming voice he used in depositions, not the soft, fatherly tone he reserved for show. This voice was sharp, cold-cutting. "You will tell them your mom screamed at you." "Got it." The room went still. "You want to live with me, don't you? You want to play your games and go to that new school? Then say what I told you to say." The judge leaned forward, face tight with disbelief. "If you screw this up, I swear I'll make sure you go somewhere worse. Somewhere far with people you don't know. So don't mess it up again." A soft, trembling voice, Oliver's. "But it's not true." Then Derek again, now snarling. "She lies about me, so I lie about her. That's fair. That's balance." Then silence. Click. The audio ended, but the echoes didn't. You could hear the fluorescent light buzzing above us. That's how quiet it got. One of the clerks gasped. Another fumbled her pen. Derek's face went slack, then pale, then red. His lawyer opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again with a stunned, "Your Honor, we have reason to believe this may have been—" "Sit down," the judge snapped. The bailiff stepped forward, his hand instinctively hovered near his radio and me. I was frozen, not in fear, but in awe. Because my son, my gentle, quiet, terrified little boy, had just spoken louder than anyone ever could. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't cried. He had told the truth in the most unshakable way possible by letting his father condemn himself. The judge's voice was low, measured, and laced with fury. "Mr. Hale," he said, glaring at Derek, "we will be suspending your motion for custody with immediate effect. In light of this audio and its context, we are issuing a protective order until further investigation can determine the extent of your coercion." Derek stood. "This is absurd. This is criminal," the judge interrupted. He looked at Oliver. "You were very brave today, young man." Then he turned to me. "Ms. Hartley, until further notice, full physical and legal custody is reinstated to you. Visitation by the father is hereby suspended pending a psychological review." Just like that, the gavel dropped, and for the first time in months, I wasn't holding my breath. Outside, under a gray sky, Oliver and I stood on the courthouse steps. He didn't smile, he didn't cheer, he just held my hand. "I didn't want to hurt him," he said softly, "but I didn't want to lose you." My knees buckled, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of that sentence. I knelt in front of him, both hands on his cheeks. "You didn't hurt him, baby. You saved yourself. You saved us both." He leaned into my arms, and for the first time in a very long time, I cried. Not from fear, not from defeat, but from the profound, overwhelming relief of being believed. That night, we sat on the living room floor, surrounded by takeout and blankets. The kind of mess that feels like freedom. Oliver built a fortress of pillows. I let him. He earned it. At some point, he handed me the recorder. "Do we still need it?" he asked. I looked at the small silver device, the little object that had cracked a mountain in half. "No," I said. "But we'll keep it, just in case someone ever tries to rewrite the truth again." He nodded. Then said something I'll never forget. The scariest part wasn't recording him. What was waiting for someone to listen? I've never been more proud, and I've never been more certain that in a world full of noise, it's the quiet truths that thunder loudest. The courtroom emptied, but the silence lingered. It followed me out to the sidewalk, into the car, down the long hallway of our apartment. It sat beside me on the couch as I held my son that night, both of us exhausted, neither of us speaking much, but it was no longer the silence of fear, it was the silence of closure, and it was deafening in its relief. The official ruling came in 2 days later. The judge's written decision was handed to me in a stiff manila envelope. I opened it with trembling hands, expecting more of the same jargon clauses, polite legalese that softens cruelty. But the first line made me stop breathing. Based on evidence submitted and verified during the final hearing, the court finds that Mr. Derek Hale knowingly and willfully attempted to manipulate the testimony of a minor, thereby undermining the integrity of this proceeding. The paragraph that followed felt like balm on an old wound, and therefore Ms. Elena Hartley is granted full legal and physical custody of the minor child Oliver Hale, effective immediately. The paper shook in my hands, not because I was surprised, but because I had spent so long being silenced, I had forgotten what justice looked like written in black ink. Derek didn't show up for the next court date. His lawyer sent a statement, something about ongoing psychological evaluation and privacy concerns. He was being investigated for parental coercion, obstruction, and emotional abuse of a minor. The recording had gone viral in legal forums. Quietly, discreetly, but it spread. A law professor I didn't know emailed my lawyer. "This case will change the way we view child testimony. You and your client have done something historic." I didn't feel heroic. I felt human again, like I could finally walk into a grocery store without rehearsing an alibi in my head, like I could finally tuck my son into bed without fearing the knock of another court-appointed observer, like I could finally exhale. Oliver changed, too. Not all at once, not in any dramatic way, but in small, almost imperceptible shifts. He started humming again, while brushing his teeth. He drew pictures where the sun had faces again. He laughed at cartoons. Real belly laughs, the kind that shake a child's entire torso. But the biggest change happened one night, a month after the ruling. I found him sitting by the window with a flashlight and his old recorder in his hand. "Do you want to delete it?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "No, I just wanted to listen, to remind myself of what." He looked at me, eyes clear, that my voice mattered. I swallowed hard because that's what every child should know. that their voice isn't too small, that their truth isn't too fragile, that even when the adults around them are loud, manipulative, or cruel, they can still be heard. People asked me later if I ever confronted Derek again. I didn't. I had already wasted years confronting a mask. What was left of him now wasn't even worth my silence. There were rumors that he moved out of state, that he resigned from his firm, that his new relationship ended. I didn't track it, didn't care to, because this was never about revenge. This was about restoration, and I had too much healing to do to keep digging through wreckage. I started writing again. Not court affidavits or legal defenses, but real writing. The kind that comes from the marrow stories letters essays about parenting, about surviving narcissistic abuse, about the courtroom as both battlefield and crucible. A nonprofit reached out to me, asking if I'd be willing to speak to be a voice for mothers, navigating family court systems rigged against nuance. I said yes, because maybe there was power in what we'd been through. Maybe our pain had purpose. Maybe the story that began with a whispered lie could end with a microphone. But not everything became public. Some victories I kept for myself, like the Saturday morning when Oliver came into my room with a drawing and said, "This is us now." It was just two stick figures holding hands under a sky that had no clouds. The caption read, "We're not scared anymore." Or the time he asked, "Do you think we'll always be okay now?" And I didn't hesitate when I answered, "We already are." I still have the recorder. It sits in the top drawer of my nightstand, beside a small paper note from Oliver, the one he gave me the day he asked if telling the truth was okay. I read it sometimes when doubt creeps in. Because that's the thing about surviving something like this. It's not about forgetting, it's about remembering who you became because of it. Some nights I lie awake and replay it all in my mind. The accusations, the courtroom, the disbelief, the audio, the moment the room went silent, the look on Derek's face. And then, the stillness that followed. The stillness where I finally heard my own voice again. They told me I was crazy, that I was hysterical, unstable, unfit. But the only thing I ever was truly was a mother who fought back, a mother who waited in the shadows of courtrooms, suffered the humiliation of questions shaped like knives, and endured the slow erosion of her identity. And then in a moment of quiet brilliance was lifted by the very child they said she was unworthy of. He saved me by believing in me. He taught me how to believe in myself again. So this is how the story ends. Not with applause, not with revenge, but with a boy who found his voice, and a mother who never let hers be taken again.